Amara moved swiftly through the bustling kitchen of the upscale restaurant, the air thick with the rich aromas of sautéed garlic and simmering sauces. She expertly balanced a tray laden with appetizers while navigating around her colleagues, who were equally engrossed in the chaos of the dinner rush. The clattering of pans, the sharp orders of the head chef, and the distant laughter of patrons created a symphony of sounds that had become all too familiar. Amara had mastered this rhythm, her body weaving through the frenetic energy with the grace of someone who belonged. As she passed through the swinging doors into the dining area, she plastered on a polite smile, a mask she wore often. The restaurant catered to the elite, and with that came a clientele that frequently wielded their wealth like a weapon. Amara approached a table where a group of well-dressed executives chatted animatedly. Their laughter rang hollow in her ears, and she could feel their eyes appraising her, an uninvited judgment lingering in the air. "Ah, here comes our favorite server," one of the men, tall and broad-shouldered, said with a smirk, his tone dripping with condescension. His name was David, and he led the group with an air of confidence that often crossed into arrogance. "Can we get another round of wine, sweetheart?" Another patron chimed in, his voice laced with a faux charm that made Amara's skin crawl. "Of course, sir," Amara replied, forcing the smile to remain plastered on her face as she turned to fill their glasses. She felt their eyes linger on her, assessing her appearance like she was a piece of art on display. Her heart sank a bit more with each sip they took, their laughter punctuating the air with a stinging reminder of her place in this world. As she returned to their table, a comment slipped from David's lips, seemingly innocent yet laced with an undercurrent of mockery. "You know, Amara, you really should consider a different hairstyle. Something more professional." His companions chuckled, and Amara's smile faltered for just a moment. She bit her tongue, forcing herself not to react, knowing the repercussions would be dire. "Thank you for the suggestion," she said, her voice steady despite the hurt that clawed at her insides. "I'll keep that in mind." "Good, because you have such potential," David added, leaning back in his chair with a smug grin that made her stomach turn. As she walked away, Amara felt the weight of their laughter pressing down on her. She had learned to navigate these conversations, to absorb the microaggressions like a sponge, but tonight felt different. Their words echoed in her mind, twisting her thoughts into knots of self-doubt. After what felt like an eternity, the dinner rush finally tapered off, the restaurant settling into a quieter rhythm. Amara retreated to the staff room, seeking solace among her fellow employees. The stark fluorescent lights above flickered as she entered, casting an unflattering glow on the worn-out furniture. "Hey, Amara, you okay?" asked Lila, a fellow server whose bright smile was a stark contrast to the dim surroundings. "Yeah, just the usual," Amara replied, sliding onto a worn-out couch. "You know how it is. Those guys are the worst," Lila said, rolling her eyes. "You should have seen the way they were looking at you. Like you're some kind of a novelty?" Amara finished, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know. It's exhausting." Lila sat beside her, concern etched across her features. "You're so much more than that, Amara. Don't let their ignorance get to you." Amara nodded, though the words felt like a fragile band-aid over a deep, festering wound. She had dreams, aspirations of becoming an artist, but every day felt like a battle against the tide of condescension that washed over her in the restaurant. The creative spark within her felt stifled, buried beneath layers of expectation and prejudice. "I wish I could just walk away from all this," she sighed, staring at the peeling wall, lost in thought. "Sometimes I feel like I'm suffocating." "Then don't just sit here. Fight back. You have a voice, Amara. Use it," Lila encouraged, her words ringing with a fierce conviction that stirred something deep inside Amara. In that moment, as the laughter of the patrons faded into the background, Amara realized she had a choice to make. She could continue to endure, or she could rise. And perhaps, just perhaps, tonight would be the night she found the courage to reclaim her narrative. Amara stepped into the local art show, her pulse quickening with a mix of excitement and trepidation. The gallery was alive with color, each piece of artwork radiating creativity and passion. Amara's fingers brushed against the cool walls, and she breathed in the scent of fresh paint and polished wood. The vibrant hues of the paintings beckoned to her, igniting a flame of inspiration within her soul. This was a sanctuary, a place where her dreams of becoming an artist felt tangible once more. So much talent in one room, she whispered to herself, her eyes scanning the vivid canvases that adorned the walls. She felt a sense of belonging here, surrounded by people who appreciated art for its beauty and its ability to provoke thought. Laughter and chatter filled the air, mingling with the clinking of glasses as patrons admired the work of local artists. Amara smiled, momentarily lost in the artistic atmosphere, her heart swelling with hope. But that hope was short-lived. As she turned a corner, her breath caught in her throat. There, amidst the laughter and the crowd, stood David and his group of friends, their jovial demeanor a stark contrast to the humiliation Amara had endured just days earlier. David's laughter echoed through the gallery, oblivious to the impact of his previous comments. Amara's stomach churned at the sight, a familiar feeling of dread washing over her. "Why here? Why now?" she muttered under her breath, her heart racing as she considered her options. She could easily turn on her heel and escape, but the thought of retreating felt like a betrayal to herself. Amara took a deep breath, grounding herself in the moment. She could feel the warmth of the art around her, reminding her of who she was and what she wanted to become. This was not just about her. It was about standing up for herself and refusing to be belittled any longer. "Amara, you can't let them get to you," she whispered, repeating a mantra she had clung to since her first day at the restaurant. But the thought of David's mocking smile sent waves of anxiety through her. With her heart pounding in her chest, she squared her shoulders and made her way toward them, determined to confront the very people who had diminished her. As she approached, the laughter faded, and a few heads turned her way. David's eyes widened in surprise, and for a brief moment, he looked uncertain. Amara felt her pulse quicken even more, but she pressed on, her voice steady despite the tremors of fear within her. "David," she began, her tone firm yet measured, "can we talk?" Sure," David replied, his casual demeanor faltering as he glanced at his friends, who exchanged confused looks. "What's up?" Amara took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of courage she had. "I wanted to address the comments you made at the restaurant. They weren't just jokes. They were hurtful. I'm not just a server. I'm an artist and I deserve respect." A tense silence enveloped them, and Amara could feel the eyes of nearby patrons upon her. David shifted uncomfortably, his friends looking increasingly awkward. "I didn't mean to offend you," he stammered, his bravado fading. "It was just, we were joking around." "Joking around?" Amara pressed, her voice rising slightly. "You don't get to invalidate my feelings because you think it's a joke. It's not funny to make someone feel small. It's not funny to reduce a person to their appearance." The atmosphere shifted palpably. The joviality of the gathering was replaced by tension, as whispers began to circulate among the onlookers. Amara could see a few people nodding in agreement, their expressions sympathetic. David's friends exchanged glances, clearly unsure of how to react. "Amara, we were just," one of his friends started, but she cut him off. "No, you were not just anything," she said, her voice steady and unwavering. "You laughed at my expense, and that's not okay. I'm tired of being treated like I'm invisible, like I'm less than because of the color of my skin. I'm not here for your amusement." She could feel the weight of her words hanging in the air, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of recognition in David's eyes. The laughter had died down, and the gallery felt charged with a new energy, one that demanded accountability. "I'm sorry," David finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't realize. I didn't think." Amara stood her ground, her heart racing but her resolve unwavering. "It's not enough to just say you're sorry. You need to understand the impact of your actions and change your behavior. People deserve to be treated with dignity, regardless of who they are or where they come from." As David absorbed her words, the crowd around them began to murmur, some offering supportive nods while others looked on with curiosity. In that moment, Amara felt a surge of power and clarity. She was no longer just a server. She was a woman standing tall for herself and for others who had been silenced. In the heart of the gallery, amidst the vibrant art that inspired her, she had found her voice. Amara took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest as she stepped closer to David and his group. The vibrant colors of the art surrounding them seemed to blur as her focus narrowed solely on the man who had belittled her just days before. The laughter and chatter of the gallery faded into a dull roar, and she could feel the weight of her own resolve pressing against her ribcage. "David," she said, her voice steady yet firm, cutting through the laughter like a knife. The group turned to her, their expressions shifting from amusement to surprise. "I need to talk to you." David, a tall man with an air of confidence that had often crossed into arrogance, raised an eyebrow, clearly taken aback by her sudden confrontation. "Oh, Amara, right?" he said, his tone feigning casualness. "What's up? What's up?" Amara echoed, her tone laced with incredulity. "You and your friends think it's funny to make comments about my appearance, to disguise your racism as compliments. Do you even realize the impact your words have?" The laughter dissipated, replaced by an uneasy silence. David fidgeted, glancing at his friends, who seemed unsure of how to react. "I didn't mean it that way," he started. But Amara interrupted him, her confidence growing with each word. "No, you didn't. You didn't think about it at all," she said, her voice rising slightly. "You see me as just a server, someone to look down on. But I'm not just that. I'm an artist, I'm a person, and I deserve the same respect you give to anyone else in this room." The crowd surrounding them began to take notice, their eyes shifting toward the escalating confrontation. Amara could sense the tension in the air. She could feel the weight of judgment resting on her shoulders, but she stood tall. "Your comments reinforce the idea that I'm lesser, that I'm somehow not worthy of your regard. And that's not just hurtful, it's damaging." David opened his mouth as if to respond, but no words came out. He looked flustered, caught off guard by her eloquence and resolve. Amara continued, her voice unwavering. "You might think it's just a joke, but it reflects a deeper issue of entitlement and privilege. It perpetuates a cycle that I, and many others, are trying to break free from." One of David's friends, a woman with a sharp haircut and designer clothes, piped up defensively. "You're overreacting. It was just a compliment." Amara turned to her, meeting her gaze without flinching. "It's not a compliment if it comes with a side of condescension. It's not a compliment if you don't see me as an equal." There was a collective intake of breath from the surrounding patrons, many now fully engaged in the unfolding drama. David's bravado began to crack. He shifted uncomfortably, his smile fading. "Look, I didn't mean to offend you," he finally managed, though the sincerity of his words was questionable. "I just thought." "You thought what?" Amara interrupted, her voice rising again, fueled by a mix of anger and empowerment. "That you could say whatever you like without consequences? That you could treat people like me as if we're invisible?" The atmosphere around them was thick with tension, and Amara could feel the shift as eyes darted between her and David. The onlookers seemed to be absorbing her words, some nodding slightly in agreement. She realized that in this moment, she wasn't just speaking for herself. She was speaking for all the people who had ever felt belittled, dismissed, or ignored. "I am reclaiming my narrative, and I won't allow anyone to define my worth but me," she declared, her voice steady and clear. "So, if you're truly sorry, take a moment to reflect on how you treat others. Change starts with you. It starts with recognizing the power of your words." For a moment, silence enveloped them. David's face had paled, his arrogance stripped away, leaving vulnerability in its place. Amara felt a rush of adrenaline, a powerful sense of agency enveloping her. She had confronted the very source of her pain, and in doing so, she had begun to reclaim her power. As the crowd around them began to murmur, Amara stood tall, her heart still racing but her spirit unyielded. This was her moment, a turning point where she would no longer allow the prejudices of others to dictate her self-worth. The art around her seemed to shine brighter as if reflecting her newfound strength, and she knew that whatever happened next, she had already won. Amara walked into the staff room, her heart still pounding from the confrontation. The The vibrant colors of the art show lingered in her mind, a stark contrast to the sterile, claustrophobic walls of the restaurant. She closed her eyes for a moment, recalling the shocked expressions on David and his friends' faces as she spoke. That moment, where she found her voice, felt like a strange mixture of exhilaration and fear. Would there be repercussions? Would they retaliate against her for standing up to them? As she sat on a worn-out chair, her colleagues began filtering in, exchanging glances and whispers. The atmosphere was thick with an unspoken tension, and Amara could sense the weight of their curiosity. It was clear that word had spread about what had happened the previous evening. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. "Hey, Amara, you were amazing last night," shouted Lily, one of the newer servers, her eyes sparkling with admiration. "I wish I had your courage." "Yeah, I couldn't believe you actually said something to them. They're such jerks," added Malik, a line cook who had grown increasingly frustrated with the way the affluent patrons treated the staff. Amara forced a smile, the warmth of their support wrapping around her like a comforting blanket, but a knot of anxiety tightened in her stomach. "Thanks, but it wasn't easy. I'm just worried about how they'll react. Who cares what they think? You stood up for yourself, and that's all that matters," Malik replied, his voice fierce with conviction. Amara nodded, even as doubts crept into her mind. "I just hope it doesn't affect my job. I need this." As the morning rush began, the hustle and bustle of the restaurant swarmed around her. Amara poured coffee and took orders, her mind racing back to the previous night. She could still hear David's laughter echoing in her ears, a sound that now felt like a taunt rather than a source of validation. She focused on her tasks, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the potential fallout from her confrontation. When the lunch service slowed, Amara found herself in the corner of the kitchen, peeling vegetables. The hum of the refrigerator and the clatter of dishes provided a familiar rhythm, but her heart remained unsettled. Would her manager, Mr. Thompson, have heard about the incident? Just then, Mr. Thompson stepped into the kitchen, his presence commanding yet approachable. He caught Amara's eye, and she felt a surge of apprehension. "Amara," he said, beckoning her over. "Can we talk?" Her heart raced. "Sure, Mr. Thompson." He gestured to a quieter area near the storage room, away from the hustle of the kitchen. Amara followed, her palms sweating. As they stood together, a silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. "I heard about what happened last night," he began, his tone neutral but serious. "I wanted to commend you for your bravery." Amara blinked, taken aback. You did?" "Yes. It takes a lot of courage to confront people like that, especially when they think they can get away with anything," he said, his voice firm. "I've seen too many staff members endure disrespect silently. You stood up for yourself and for all of us." A wave of relief washed over Amara. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. I couldn't let them continue to treat me like that." "I understand," he replied, nodding. "And believe me, many of our patrons respect you for speaking out. It's not easy, but it's necessary." She felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. "I appreciate your support. I just hope it doesn't cause any issues for the restaurant. Rest assured, as long as you maintain professionalism, we'll support you," he said, his eyes steady. "You've got a lot of talent, Amara. Don't let anyone dim your light." Encouraged, she smiled brightly, the weight of uncertainty lifting slightly. "Thank you. That means a lot coming from you." As the day continued, whispers circulated among the staff, but they felt different now. Conversations turned to admiration rather than judgment. Amara found herself standing a little taller, her confidence beginning to flourish amidst the supportive words of her colleagues. Later that evening, as the restaurant filled with patrons, the energy felt different. There was an undercurrent of respect in the way the staff interacted with the diners. Amara noticed a few familiar faces among the clientele, and she felt the intensity of their gazes. Each time she served a table, she carried herself with grace, her shoulders back, her head held high. The whispers of the staff had transformed into a chorus of encouragement that resonated within her. The evening wore on, and with each passing moment, Amara realized that her voice, once fragile and uncertain, was beginning to resonate far beyond the confines of the restaurant. Days slipped by slowly after the incident at the art show, but Amara felt the weight of those moments lingering in the air as she prepared for another evening shift at the restaurant. The kitchen buzzed with the usual energy, but Amara's heart raced with the thought of David's potential return. She had been bracing herself for confrontation, for dismissive looks or worse, an attempt to belittle her again. It was a strange mix of anxiety and defiance that fueled her movements as she plated the evening's specials, yet a part of her felt emboldened by the courage she had shown. The restaurant's doors swung open, and there he was. David, clad in an expensive suit that reflected his status, stepped inside. Amara's stomach dropped. She had half hoped he wouldn't come back, but here he was, looking out of place among the bustling crowd of diners. She could feel the stares from her colleagues, their eyes darting between her and him. It was as if the entire room held its breath. David scanned the room, his expression shifting from smug confidence to uncertainty as he approached Amara. She straightened her back, forcing a professional smile as she steadied her gaze on him. "What can I get for you today?" she asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her chest. "Amara," he began, his voice low and hesitant. "Can we talk?" The words hung in the air, thick with tension. Amara raised an eyebrow, waiting for the punchline, expecting him to crack a joke or make light of the situation. But instead, his features softened, and he looked genuinely unsettled. "I wanted to apologize for how I acted the other night," he continued, stumbling over his words. "What I said, it was wrong. I didn't realize how hurtful my comments were, and I'm sorry." Amara's heart raced, caught off guard by the sincerity in his voice. She scanned his face for signs of insincerity, but saw only vulnerability. "You don't get to apologize and expect everything to be okay," she replied firmly, crossing her arms. "Words matter, and the impact of your actions doesn't just disappear with an apology." "I know that," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been thinking about it a lot. I didn't see you as a person, just someone who worked for me. But that's not an excuse. I want to do better." The sincerity pierced through Amara's defenses, yet her skepticism lingered. "What does that mean? How do I know you really mean it?" David took a breath, his gaze steady on hers. "I want to learn. I want to understand. I've been talking to people at work, trying to grasp what privilege really means and how it affects others. It's uncomfortable, but I know it has to be done." Amara considered his words, feeling a shift within her. It was hard to let go of the anger and hurt, but she also recognized the potential for growth. Not just for him, but for herself as well. "Change isn't easy, David. It takes time, and it takes action. You can't just say you want to learn. You have to show it." "I will. I promise," he said, his voice steady yet earnest. "I'm willing to listen and to change. Please give me a chance to prove it." Amara nodded slowly, her defenses lowering just a fraction. "I'll accept your apology, but know that it's going to take time for me, and for you, to rebuild trust. This isn't just about you learning. It's about me reclaiming my space." "Understood," David replied, visibly relieved yet still cautious. As he turned to leave, Amara felt a strange sense of liberation. She had confronted him, stood her ground, and had been heard. In that moment, she realized that her voice had power, not just over her own narrative, but potentially over others as well. Change could happen, even in unexpected ways. As the evening unfolded, Amara carried a newfound sense of hope. The world was still rife with challenges, but she was beginning to understand that confronting them was part of her journey, a journey she was finally ready to embrace. Amara sat in her small apartment, the soft glow of the television illuminating her face as she flipped through channels. A breaking news segment caught her attention, and she leaned closer, her heart racing as the words "corporate scandal" flashed across the screen. The familiar logo of David's company filled the backdrop as the anchor began to report on the fallout from a recent investigation into the treatment of employees and customers. David's company has been accused of fostering a toxic work environment, with multiple reports of harassment and discrimination coming to light. The anchor stated, her voice steady yet imbued with urgency. Amara's breath caught in her throat. She remembered the way David had laughed with his friends, the the snide remarks that cut deeper than she had let on. Now, those same words seemed to echo in the firm's walls, threatening to take down the very structure of privilege that had belittled so many. As the report continued, Amara learned that a whistleblower had come forward, shedding light on the culture of disrespect that permeated the upper echelons of the company. David's face appeared on the screen, looking strained and haggard, his signature smirk replaced by a grimace. "We take these allegations very seriously," he stammered during a brief interview, but Amara could see the cracks in his facade. The news anchor continued, "In an unexpected turn of events, David has been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation." Amara felt a rush of vindication wash over her. The weight of her experiences, the years of microaggressions, the humiliation, all of it seemed to culminate in this moment. "Finally," she whispered to herself, her heart swelling with a mix of joy and disbelief. Justice was being served in a way she had scarcely dared to hope for. Days passed, and the buzz about the scandal intensified. Amara found herself glued to the news, waiting for updates. Each report seemed to peel back another layer of David's carefully constructed image, revealing the truth behind the polished exterior. As she prepared for her shifts at the restaurant, she noticed a change in the atmosphere among her coworkers. It was as if a collective breath had been released. The weight of fear and silence was lifting. One evening, as she wiped down tables and took orders, her manager approached her with a serious expression. "Amara, can we talk for a moment?" he asked, leading her to the back of the restaurant. "I want you to know how proud I am of you. Your courage to stand up for yourself has inspired the entire team." Amara blinked, surprised. "I didn't expect anyone to notice," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "People are talking," he continued, "and it's not just about the incident. They're talking about how you deserve respect and how your voice matters. We're all behind you." For the first time in a long while, Amara felt the warmth of support envelop her. The restaurant that had once felt like a cage now buzzed with the promise of change. Then, a few days later, an email arrived that would forever alter her path. As Amara sipped her morning coffee, she opened the message to find an invitation to showcase her artwork at a prominent gallery in the city. The words, "Your unique voice needs to be heard," leapt off the screen, igniting a fire within her. Her heart raced as she thought about the possibility of sharing her art, her true passion, with the world. "This is it," she murmured, her breath catching in her throat. She was no longer merely a waitress, a target of ridicule. She was an artist, a creator with a story to tell. With newfound confidence, Amara set to work preparing for the gallery showcase. She poured her heart into each piece, channeling her experiences into her art, transforming pain into beauty. As she painted, she felt a profound sense of purpose. Each stroke was a declaration of her resilience and an affirmation that her voice mattered. The day of the showcase arrived, and as she stood in the gallery surrounded by her work, Amara felt a surge of pride. She had not only reclaimed her narrative, but had also transformed it into something powerful and beautiful. As guests began to arrive, her heart raced with anticipation and hope, knowing that she was stepping into a future where her voice would echo, loud and clear, demanding respect and inspiring others to embrace their own journeys. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and watch this next story. It's really exciting.